Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, as well as the Basement Radio Arcade podcast on the Brat Podcast Network channel on YouTube. Well, not really back, here with an episode of Game Logic talking about games. Not really absolutely certain exactly how this is going to go. Doing this on my own tonight. I've got to stop at some point and just check and make sure audio is coming out on YouTube. So we will be taking care of some various admin and logistics like that. But we've got a few topics that I want to talk through here tonight, including initial impressions on Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, PS5 exclusive Stellar Blade delayed until 2024, UK software sales for the week ending December 23rd, seems best of 2023 charts, look back at what has sold the most on Steam. CD Projekt Red's recent comments about not wanting to be acquired, and then some postscript notes about a recommendation for a listen on Digital Foundry's Worst PC Ports podcast. So with that, let's get started with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora initial impressions. Okay, so I did want to check and make sure audio was coming out on the live stream, so that's working all right. Okay, so I don't have footage recorded yet of Pandora, so I'm just going to let the trailer play here in the background while we're going over this, over my notes that I've been posting to Twitter, and then we'll cover a few other ones that I wanted to get through tonight as well. So I got started in Avatar Frontiers of Pandora last night. Had a game crash when I initially went into the game, and that has happened a few times as I played last night and played again today. In fact, today, in about a 90-minute gameplay session, I had about 4 or 5 crashes, including one of which was a B-side. So when a game crashes, but it's recoverable, so it crashes back to the desktop so that the operating system stays up, doesn't pull the entire PC down with it. I am playing on PC, by the way, I should mention. Then, that's a thing, but it's not as bad of a thing. But when it pulls the entire system down, that is a bit more concerning. So I had that happen once. I haven't had it occur again, so we'll just kind of keep an eye on it. Again, this being a game from Ubisoft by Massive Entertainment, one of my favorite game studios of current times, and just came out on December 7th. So it just came out, give or take a few weeks of elasticity there for the holidays and whatnot. But it's a game that came out this month. A lot of these crashes that have happened to me have been during cinematics. On more than one occasion, I've had a cinematic playing, and then the game just crashed the desktop. And then when I go back into the game, it recovers at a save point where I'm not in the exact same location I was when the cutscene crashed. But fortunately, in every occasion so far, and cutscene crashes have been about 3 out of the 5 or so that I've seen, it has picked back up and allowed me to see the entirety of the cutscene. Because one of the things that would have been disconcerting is if I would have missed part of the story because, the cutscene crashed and I couldn't get back to the cutscene. A few technical notes about the game. The game has NVIDIA DLSS 2 implemented right now, not DLSS 3. It also doesn't have NVIDIA Reflex implemented, so there's no frame generation there for NVIDIA equipped rigs. There is FSR 3 that has been implemented, and so people running on Radeon GPUs will be able to take advantage of frame generation. I ran the in-game benchmark. I'm playing right now on a rig that I just built this month, a couple weeks ago, that runs on a AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D, an NVIDIA RTX 4080 and has 64 gigabytes of DDR5, 6400 megahertz RAM in the box. And so I ran the in-game benchmark. I came away with an average of 130 frames per second. The GPU running with those settings ran about 62 degrees C, and my CPU temp has been in the high 50s. I did see CPU temps go high at one point, like when it was loading assets or something. But in general, it doesn't appear to be a very CPU intensive game. Those temperatures, like I said, for the CPU especially, the CPU utilization was very low. It wasn't high at all. So the overall benchmark floated around between 96 frames per second and 147 frames per second. It showed a really high GPU workload, which yesterday when I set it, I'm playing at 1440p on high settings, it showed about 9.3 to 9.8 gigabytes of VRAM being used out of the 16. So, definitely not kind of getting into the danger zone in terms of the settings that I had in place. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about settings after I go through some more comments. So I'm trying to reconcile in my head, why I was showing, so not too high VRAM usage, but overall GPU utilization was at 97%. I guess that's probably because I don't know exactly what that utilization metric in the in-game benchmark is tied to. I assume maybe it's tied to memory bandwidth, which is an overall expression of the bus width as well as the clock speed that it's pumping at, and so that's probably more what it shows. So at any rate, the game is fairly performant. That's always one of my big concerns. I recently just posted on Twitter what my kind of top gaming priorities are, and for me it is performance. So in a year where we had a lot of people saying performance doesn't matter, 30 frames per second is okay, anybody concerned about 60 frames per second is just concern trolling. I don't believe that. I pay a not insignificant amount of money for my gaming PCs. If I've paid $700, $1,500, whatever for a GPU, I want to play a game that takes advantage of that GPU. Another note on the game, just if you're looking at picking it up, because of the exclusivity arrangement between Ubisoft and Epic Games, the game is only available if you buy it directly from Ubisoft or from the Epic Games Store. It is not available over on Steam. I want to go through my second set of notes here that I posted earlier today. Okay, additional notes. In the opening sequence of the base interior, if you're looking at the textures to me didn't appear, to be that great as far as, texture fill and overall level of detail. They seem pretty flat. And so if you've played Assassin's Creed Mirage, hey, Otacon, what's up? Thanks so much for coming through the live stream. Appreciate you. Soko time. Yeah, we'll have a talk about whether I had a tall draft Modelo at a Mexican restaurant earlier tonight where I went to grab dinner for everyone, and I was like, wow, man, I really should incorporate having a drink on stream. It would really help me out. But thanks a lot for coming to the live stream. Are you watching the Lions? I haven't been keeping up with football. My impression is that if you're watching the Lions now, at least I think you guys have been happier with their performance this season. So hopefully you're having a good time with that on one half of the screen and my live stream on the other. Like I said, so textures seem to be not very detailed. And those are my initial impressions going into the game. I'm starting to see some differences in those textures when you exit outside the human base, that base interior. Pandora to me is a fairly amazing set of visuals. And I'll get more of that later as I talk about the game. I'm not going to do a complete review. I'm just trying to get through my initial impressions tonight. But when you're inside the base, starting off the game, those textures don't appear very detailed. If you've played Assassin's Creed Mirage, you can kind of see in that game where Ubisoft has talked about, where there's that line, that threshold of that line of demarcation and the difference between a AAA and a AA game. You can kind of definitely see in Assassin's Creed Mirage where they backed off of the level of detail in order to have less overall level of effort, smaller budget to get that game out the door. I mean, that's kind of the impression that I had in the interior visuals at the start of Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. Again, the game is very performant, even in that interior. This year has brought a lot of games on PC that suffered from a lot of stutter and kind of hitching. EAWRC, my most disappointing game of the year, definitely suffered from that. But you had none of that in there. Gameplay inside was smooth and very performant. They have a randomizer in the character creation screen, which to me was a very big deal. I like having like kind of a bespoke character appearance when I go into a game. Now, that all being said, you don't see yourself in the game. The game does have co-op, and so the impression is you have to get to either some point in the game, complete a certain mission. I'm not entirely clear. It may be that you have to do a complete playthrough before you can play co-op. I don't think that's the case. I think you have to get to a certain point in the game, and then you can play co-op. So, the other person in the game would be able to see you. But I like I said, if you're going to give me the tools for the character to have, for me to tailor what their appearance looks like, I do like to have that appearance not just be like the baseline character model that the game defaults to. That being said, I also don't like to spend a ton of time monkeying with a bunch of sliders. If you've played Street Fighter 6, it has like a bajillion sliders everywhere to modulate your appearance. And I love games that have a randomizer button. You just go in and you hit the randomizer. And what I really like about this game, some games have that, but they have a randomizer like for each individual like component of the appearance. I had to test it a couple times to make sure it was doing it. But when you hit the randomizer in this game, it randomizes every component of the character's appearance. So I really like that. So like I said, it's kind of it's like I said, I like having it not, I feel like every game should implement that if they're going to let you manipulate the character appearance. But I feel like only about 50% of the games that I see come across my windshield have that implemented. Voice acting in the outgoing is not too bad. It's actually maybe just a skosh above average. My big problem this year has been there have been a lot of voice acting performances that just don't convey all of the emotion across that I feel like the character should be experiencing, that they're portraying. It's just kind of a flat, and especially it's like when the characters are in crisis, like I don't get across like a sense of urgency or like this is a critical like life impacting thing that's going on. I did get that a pretty good deal from the characterizations. The character that I like so far is Solek, who is kind of to me modeled along some of my favorite characters from sci-fi, Teal'c, Worf, Ronan Dex from Stargate Atlantis, and Solek is kind of that. He's kind of like a warrior, but he's a silent warrior. He can kind of handle everything. He gets into some situations in the beginning part of the game that allow you to kind of get in there. And so he's not invulnerable, but he clearly comes across as kind of a warrior and such a warrior that he can be completely like calm in crisis situations. So I really liked his character portrayal. Otacon Ocelot in the chat says, I'm definitely picking up this game when price is cut pretty good. I'm still barely into Baldur's Gate 3. One other note, I guess I should say, if you do go to the Ubisoft store, I'm not sure how long this sale lasts, but if you go to the Ubisoft store and use the code Holiday20, you do get 20% off on the game. There were some restrictions on it, so I was monkeying around buying the game. I think something else came up while I was trying to check out, and so I forgot to apply the discount code. So this may be a situation where it's a new title, and so they don't allow you to apply the discount code, but you can give that a try. Otacon also mentions, I was a senior in high school when Elder Scrolls Oblivion launched, and 100% graduated with a randomized Oblivion NPC. So let's see, other notes on initial impressions. Okay, so that's everything that I wrote on Twitter. A couple of the additional notes that I wanted to mention. I think my mic's further my way than I planned to be. Checking out the notes that I've been taking on my Galaxy Z Fold 5 here. So initially going to the game, and this was this was a major problem for me. Initially going into the game, I had the impression that there was no FOV slider. And then when I went into my second session today, I'm like, there's no way that that this windshield is constrained as badly as it is. One of the things that I do really like in the design implementation of the game is that, particularly when you're inside in the human base, it definitely comes across that you're a Na'vi and you are larger than a human. The character modeling, just as far as like the difference in height, like as you're walking around, you can like clearly see that the humans are smaller than you are. But also, as you're going through the base, doors are made for humans. They're not made for the Na'vi. So you have to duck and you have to slide. The kinesthetics are really incredibly smooth in this game. They to me cut across very similar to Mirror's Edge. It's kind of like a big parkour simulation. So Minstree popped into the chat and said the UI is horrible. Yeah, I don't disagree. I have some notes on that. I guess not so much UI in terms of the menu system, because that's what most people think that you're referring to when you talk about the UI. But I mean, just the HUD is problematic, and I have notes on that. I may not get into all of those things tonight, but there is an FOV slider in the game, but maybe this is an example of what Minstree talks about. To me, from a design perspective, the FOV slider should be in the graphic settings. There are video settings and there are graphic settings. The video settings are kind of your top level, higher level toggles that impact overall performance, whereas the graphic settings, tend to be very incremental. And that's, to me, where the FOV slider should be. It is in the general gameplay settings, and so I played for 2 hours or so without knowing that it was there. In fact, I came across it in a Google, because I just hit a point in the game where I was like, there's no way in the world this game doesn't have an FOV slider. One of the things that I wanted to mention, that I talked about VRAM utilization that I wanted to come back to is, again, session 1, I was seeing VRAM utilization about 9.3 to 9.8 based on how I had the settings configured in the menu. When I went and moved FOV, and FOV defaults to 80 degrees. So just like if you've ever played like Killzone right on the PlayStation 3, it's that kind of experience. I felt like I was in a gas mask. But I moved that up to 104. I didn't think to check what my VRAM utilization was immediately after I set the FOV. Later in the session, I went and I just happened to look at it, and I'm like, holy cow, man, this thing was at 9.3, 9.8 yesterday. Now it's like 12.3. What the heck happened? Having forgotten that I bumped the FOV up. So for me, on my rig, again, bumping from 80 degrees to 104, I think is what I set it at, is a significant impact to VRAM utilization. Like I said, talk about the locomotion is great. You really get that conveyance of size. There are things like when you're out on the planet in Pandora and you're running downhill, you can actually see from the character's hands, and you can see them pick up speed as they go downhill. You can see them at some points. It's kind of conveyed through the way the screen tilts. That they're if you've ever run downhill and you run kind of on the front of your feet, right? You're trying not to go head over heels tumbling down the hill. You get that. There are small touches in animations, like when your character is pushing through the foliage on Pandora. You can see the hands kind of moving the leaves back and forth. Like I said, those types of things are really great. The locomotion, the kinesthetics, conveyance of size, really great. Last thing that I'll mention tonight, it's a small nit, but to me as a PC gamer, it's a thing that I find particularly aggravating and be impactful. Some of the keybinds that I am normally accustomed to using in first-person shooters don't work in this game. In particular, I use the Alt key for crouch and for slide. Alt does not map to crouch and slide in this game. You have to use the Control key, which I dislike, because what it causes me to do, it causes me to have to reach over the Windows key. And so, if you miss and hit the Windows key, then it brings up, the operating system menu, and it pauses your game or disrupts your game or whatever. So those little things, I'm not particularly happy about. I guess I'll mention another thing, when Minstree, talks about the UI being terrible. There are little things like that really bother me, like when you get to the point where you can utilize the map to navigate around Pandora, you when it you're when you are when you're on a quest and your quest is the selected target, that does not bring up a waypoint. And so when you're rotating around on your HUD, you get a cardinal direction heading indicator up at the top of your HUD. There's nothing that comes up on there that tells you you're heading in the direction of your quest. You can drop a manual waypoint. You can actually drop custom waypoints. Dropping custom waypoints doesn't bring up a pip indicator on your HUD. Dropping a normal waypoint does. You cannot drop a normal waypoint on top of a quest because it uses the same key. Now, maybe if you change the key mapping, it will work, but the default key mapping is both the spacebar for dropping a waypoint. That is also the default mapping for deselecting the quest. And so if you tried to put a waypoint right on top of your quest, you're going to wind up actually untagging the quest, and not dropping a waypoint, because when you hit the spacebar again, it reselects the quest. So I have to wind up like looking at where my character is, where the mission is that I'm going to, and dropping a waypoint on a vector line, right, going to the opposite side of the thing so that I'm just heading in the right general direction. Because one thing about Pandora, maybe it'll change the more I'm in the game, you like the foliage is so thick. Again, it's a beautiful place, but unless you're following a river, it's really difficult, amazingly difficult to tell like whether you're going in the right direction or things like that. One of the missions that I went on, like I was going after like a drill, a huge drill, going into a mine, and so it was giving off an audio indicator, so I could follow that noise. But like I said, I couldn't really, just tell, because the geography is so random and crazy. It's you can't tell where you're going. Minstry says how to upgrade weapons and gear rarity is not explained as well. Yeah, that's a general thing, Minstry. I agree. In the game, the game just doesn't explain a lot to you, and there's so little wiggle room with that, in my opinion, in game design, where if you call that a spectrum of 0 to 100, right, of how much is explained or not explained, up to a certain point, that's okay, and you can figure things out. In the first mission, you are told to go gather a resource to make arrows for your bow. Well, the thing they pop up on your HUD is not actually the resource that you need to gather. It's kind of like if you've played Forza Horizon, and Forza Horizon gives you like a big circle for like a barn find, and you get into the general area, then you have to search around for it. It's kind of like that. It's just an indicator of the general area where you need to search around for the resource. That's not explained to you though. So I spent, 10 minutes like trying to gather resources from this tree that was not actually the target resource. Just amazingly, for whatever reason, in that geography of that mission, I then also scanned, past that, and I went searching past that tree from where I was coming from, and searched to the left. There were none of the resources. The resources did actually have to be entirely to the right of that marker, which is where I did not search until I had already been pulled my hair out for 6 minutes. So there are things like that the game doesn't explain to you, that are definitely toggling my problem with onboarding that typically tends to make me fall off of a game. But yeah, those. So I'll continue to play through it and see what other impressions I come up with. Let's go ahead and go on and get into the news. I'll try and burn through this because I didn't expect to talk about initial impressions on Avatar Frontiers of Pandora so much. First story in the rundown: PS5 exclusive stylish action adventure Stellar Blade delayed until 2024. This news story over on No Ads for Guns. No ADS for Guns. Oof. Yeah, I played Trepang 2 earlier this year, and that was like that, and I've recently been replaying through Half-Life 2, and it also has that particular design quirk. So, yeah, I definitely get how that is not a pleasant experience. Sorry, just trying to bring up the news story. Yeah, PS5 exclusive stylish action adventure Celebrate delayed to 2024. The story over on Tryhard Guides. Sony Interactive Entertainment has concluded 2023 with a summary of its anticipated titles for the upcoming year And one of the surprising reveals was Stellar Blade. The Korean developer Shift Up officially introduced Stellar Blade in September 2022 with an initial release window of 2023. However, the latest update on the PlayStation blog has disclosed a shift in plans, indicating a postponement of Stellar Blade's release to 2024. So if you have been paying attention to Stellar Blade at all, and I haven't entirely. So we're going to pull up the trailer and let this stream in the background as well. It's a third-person action-adventure game filled with kind of a lot of fluidity of movement and some pretty interesting elements of combat. However, for me, the note I put here in my show notes is Yatpag, yet another third-person action-adventure game. And we have a ton of those, saturation of those in the market. That's never probably going to change, and that's never going to go away, because that is the genre that is most well-suited for consoles. And so while consoles remain in the zeitgeist, that's not going to go away. The game runs on Unreal Engine 4. It was originally announced in 2019, and I have my own thoughts on games that have been baking for 4 years and have shown up at multiple E3s and showcases. And I'm like, I don't know that games need to be shown that many times. I'm not super wrapped around the axle about them being announced early, as some people are, but if you announce them early, I don't know that you need to show them like every single year before they're done, when you keep kicking the can down the road. But at any rate, it was shown in 2019, and then it was initially announced for multiple platforms. It came back, I think, a couple of years later with where they just kind of skated by mentioning anything about platforms. And then I think last year, 2022, maybe later in 2021. 2021, the voice track changed, and they started talking about it being an exclusive, and also published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. So that's what it is now. It's now going to be an exclusive for PlayStation 5. They are implementing haptic feedback on the DualSense. For me, like I said, the game looks really well. I think one of the reasons I haven't, been, super, I don't know, super thirsty about it is because I feel like in the demos and in the trailers, the game has leaned very heavily on the representation of the female character, and a certain degree of sexualization of the character. That's fine, and it's kind of weird that we're in this day and age where I constantly see this ongoing dialogue about people who are particularly offended by females looking, kind of plain in video games and not being some super fantastical like representation of like what they think a beautiful woman is supposed to be like. That's not the thing that makes me want to play a video game, and it's not the thing that I'm not going to declare a video game mid because the woman looks average, right, or realistic, I think some people might say. So at any rate, for that reason, the game really hasn't popped on my radar. But we'll keep an eye on it and just kind of see where it goes. Next story I want to talk about is UK software sales for the week ending December 23rd, 2023. Priscilla has come into the chat and says, made it live. Yay. Yes, I did, Priscilla. We'll be doing that more frequently in 2024 is the plan. So let's talk about UK software sales. All right, the story over on Nintendo Everything. One thing I really like about Nintendo Everything, which is not a site that I normally read, when the UK software sales are presented on a lot of other sites, that list that comes from, I'm not even sure, I think it's some British equivalent of kind of like MPD, is 40 deep, and there are lots of notes about the other games on the list, but typically most sites only list the top 10, but Nintendo Everything actually lists all 40, so that's pretty cool. So like I said, this story by Brian over at Nintendo Everything. The latest UK software sales chart for the week ending December 23rd, 2023 is now available. is now available. Super Mario Brothers Wonder and Hogwarts Legacy have been going back and forth between the second and third spots now, and that's the case this time around as well. Super Mario Brothers ended up at the second spot and almost took home number one. EA Sports almost took home number one. EA Sports FC24 ultimately took home the first position. So a couple of notes here. We're going to hit some other stories where you're going to see Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 pop up high on a lot of charts, and it's charting everywhere. It's charting on Xbox, it's charting on PlayStation 5, it's charting on Steam, it's charting here in the UK, but it's not at number one, which has historically been what we have been accustomed to seeing, right? The annual Call of Duty release, but it's not this year, and it's a little weird. I mean, EA Sports FC24 also tends to be charting across all platforms in lots of different regions. And EA Sports FC24 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 are multi-platform, but right up there with them is Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which is only on the Nintendo Switch. So some interesting dynamics going on in sales data across the industry right now. Avatar is in at number 8, the game that I just spent 20 minutes talking about my initial impressions on. Yay for Ubisoft. Ubisoft has had some really nice fall performance numbers. They have charted The Crew Motorfest. They've charted Avatar. They've charted Assassin's Creed Mirage. And we saw, instances of those games being propped up as nominees for the video game awards, and we see them showing up in other award shows as well. Avatar wasn't part of the TGAs because it came out too late, but we'll see how that plays in other award shows. But we did see The Crew Motorfest and Assassin's Creed Mirage pop. So it's really good. Maybe, I think some people might say, I'm an Ubisoft stan, so it's nice to see them doing well with all the adversity that they have encountered this year. I have The Crew Motorfest, I think, on Xbox, and it definitely a title that I need to get back to. Not perfect, has some rough edges, but warrants, but it's selling well. Warrants me going back and taking a look at it. Other notables on the list, Gran Turismo 7 in at number 15. It was down at slot position 29 on the UK charts last week. Assassin's Creed Mirage, which I just mentioned, in at number 11. Jedi Survivor in at number 20. In this, there are a handful of games, and again, we're going to make some additional mentions of them later in the show, that, I talked a lot on the front end of this episode about games being performant, about my own personal prioritization for games performing well, particularly as a PC gamer. And this is a game that didn't at launch, and I didn't play it on PC. I have it on PlayStation 5, but even after the things that have been done on PlayStation 5, I still have problems and find fault with the visuals. They're just not that great, and so in fact. I'm often like, why would I bother running in quality mode when the visuals just aren't that great in the first place? I may as well run in performance mode. It's just a game that failed to really hit the apogee that I felt a studio like Respawn should have been able to hit, but yet it continues to sell well. And we're going to talk again on some other points in the show about how there's this ongoing paradox. And this is, we have this problem, and we see this with Madden, with Call of Duty, with other games that are long-running franchises, games as a service, annual installments, where they hit these sales numbers every single year, whether the game is mediocre that year or great, and that's fine. But these, when it happens, when it's a single-player game and it's a single iteration, or maybe in this case even just the one sequel, it's worrisome and bothersome, right? Because you will kind of unilaterally look around the industry and the community and the media and see problems with the uptake of the game from a critical perspective, but you'll see it selling incredibly well, and you worry about what that signals, what that telemetry, that market telemetry sends back to the vendor, in terms of, in particular, am I going to keep devs on this game and continue to have them patch it and improve it and make it better, or it's selling so well, why would I bother? Should I not, start recycling that team and recouping that level of effort and putting them on the next project? So I don't want to I hate to sound and come down on, man, I wish Jedi Survivor wasn't selling as well, but maybe I wish Jedi Survivor wasn't selling so well. So other notables on the list, Miles Morales in at 29, so representative of the knock-on effect of Spider-Man 2. So, good for Sony. Red Dead Redemption in at 33. Here notes on the resilience of Rockstar and their staying power on the charts. Red Dead Redemption in at number 33. Not only that, but Red Dead Redemption 2 in at 37. And this is Red Dead Redemption, theoretically, the reslicked version, right, that came out on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5, I guess. And games that Strauss is not giving you a super discount for. So, but they're marquee properties from the 2K stable, and they command that asking price on the market. So those are the UK charts. Again, as I often mention on Enough to Keep Going, the reason I personally look at the UK charts to me are like the weekly Golden Globes of the industry, and they're foretelling of what you might expect to come out from MPD when Matt Piscatella puts those out, a few weeks later. So Minstry mentions like Zelda and Mario, Star Wars has a built-in fandom that will buy it no matter. Yeah, and there you go, Minstry. Even was it Force Unleashed that really wasn't that great a game from a critical perspective, but went on to sell well enough to get a sequel. So I guess things like that happen, and I really apologize, but I told myself when I started doing these solo gigs, the big problem I have is I don't drink my coffee, or my energy drink, which actually I need to do not just for energy, but actually to keep my throat from getting raspy. So give me just a second to swallow some down. Okay, on with the show. So for some reason, this story actually starts off on rock paper shotgun. For some reason, I lost that one. So although I have the Steam list up on the screen, let me start from the first article over on rock paper shotgun. This article by Graham Smith. Steam's Best of 2023 charts the year's bestsellers and most played. And I quote, Valve have put together their Best of 2023 list on Steam. This is different from the Steam Awards, voting for which is ongoing, and instead is built from Steam data, like revenue, peak concurrent players, and so on. It's interesting every year, as older games or indie obscurities do better than you expect. So this list, as far as I can tell, there are a couple tabs you could scroll across, I guess, to get to things like most played, but mostly it's a revenue list. They have these buckets that they've assigned platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. But within those groups, and as far as I can tell, I've not been able to track down like what the revenue span is, like whether or not these games were all made $3 million or above or whatever. I haven't been able to track that down. The other thing is within the groups, it's pretty neat. Every time you go to the site, every time you go to the Steam site, the groups are randomized, so they're not ranked. That you just know that they're in the bucket, so you know that they're within a certain band. But you don't know whether or not, like Baldur's Gate 3, this article says Baldur's Gate 3 made more money than Cyberpunk 2077. Again, it's based on revenue, not unit sales. But the other thing that's super interesting is like I said, when you go to each time you go to the site, even if you go from the same computer, the same IP address, it randomizes the order that they're in. So pretty neat. So go back to the Steam list. Let's kind of cut through some of the notables here. Priscilla T also mentions, always make time for coffee. Now I'm getting me a cup, thanks. No worries at all. So things that are in the platinum list, and of course, again, I made my show notes based on the order that I saw on the screen, and then of course it changes every time. So Lost Ark is in the platinum tier, which is super interesting because to me it's kind of a quiet giant. I haven't heard, maybe I didn't trust it, I haven't heard Amazon talk a lot about this game making a lot of money. You would think that that would be one of the things that Amazon would talk about. What it kind of belies to me is that they've gone a little silent. And maybe is not as much of a strategic priority, this gaming venture that they were going out on. I know that they're working on. I think they have a partnership for. I think Embracer farmed out the Tomb Raider IP to them. I think, but it's up here, and it's good to see that they did score a win and that people are playing it. Destiny 2 is in here in the platinum group as well. So what's hilarious, maybe tragic, but also maybe shows some a shade of silver lining in the cloud, right? All the sturm and drang about the layoffs at Bungie and about what this potentially means about the sanctity of the acquisition by Sony. Was the acquisition a failure? Blah blah blah. Again, a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth. But but the soundbite is out there. Obviously, that it was because Bungie was failing to meet targets, and those were targets that, as far as I could tell, were their own internal targets, not necessarily targets that were forced on them by Sony, but that they were as much as I think 45% off was the figure that I saw. Maybe it was 45 to 50 or 55. But again, here we are, one of the highest revenue earning games on Steam, but still missing their own targets. Now, partially what that means is maybe the silver lining that I talked about is maybe they just set the targets too high, right? But they're not necessarily, in danger. It's just that they had very lofty aspirations. Sony themselves has aspirations to sell 25 million PlayStation 5s this year, right? Which is a number that they're doing things like having the PlayStation Portal recorded as a console unit sale, right? And what we don't know right now is maybe that's so that they can speak to Wall Street and say, hey, we hit the 25 million number. I don't know. But the point is that there are challenges all around, and you can further challenge yourself by setting goals that are too high. Remember, Wall Street punishes you when you set goals that are too high and then miss them, even if you overall did well. Wall Street also punishes you if you overachieve. It's not as important to them, to investors, that you do well. What's important is that your predictions be accurate. And again, Bungie is a subsidiary of PlayStation, of Sony, of SIE, so their financial performance is not like singled out, like separate from the entire business unit, but it does play a hand in the overall business unit financial health. So, so there's that. Starfield, and this is, again, I go back to one of these performance paradoxes that kind of bothers me. Starfield is in the platinum group, but as you can see here, their reviews on Steam are mixed, and they have been mostly negative at points. We had this problem with Battlefield 2042 as well, where the game was not critically reviewed well, lots of volume of people not satisfied with it, had bad reviews for a very long period of its life cycle on Steam, but yet continued to sell well, continued to be seen in the charts. And this is where I have the utmost confidence and love for the Steam community and my ability to lean on their reviews as being accurate. They are the only body of user reviews that I consider valid or credible at all, because they are formulated by people. It's a requirement that you actually have to have bought the game. Steam has done things to also improve that. I talked a few weeks ago on Brap's podcast, where I shouldn't say Brap's podcast because that's redundant. That's one of my pet peeves on Brap, about how now when you go into Steam user reviews, you can actually see additional parametrics on the consumer, meaning did they return the game for a refund? You can see their number of hours that they have played. So you can look at a person who has 6 hours of time in a game and wrote a really caustic review and maybe throw that one out. So you have additional tools in there to draw these conclusions. And so I consider them very accurate and very valid. But I also, in this case, just like I talked about Jedi Survivor, I'm incredibly frustrated to a certain extent that the game is selling incredibly well on Steam, where it has bad reviews. Right? Like I don't get it. And so in this platinum tier, there are only 3 games that have mixed reviews. Everybody else is positive, mostly positive, very positive. Starfield, Call of Duty, and PUBG all have mixed reviews, but yet they're in the platinum tier for revenue earners. Down in the gold tier, you've got Warframe, which is pulling good numbers. I always like seeing that because Warframe doesn't make you buy into its content packs in the way that like Destiny 2 does, which means they're entirely beholden to people going into their storefront and spending money, which apparently people do at a sufficient rate that gets them into the gold tier on the Steam top revenue earners list. So that is good to see. Nothing else particularly remarkable to me in the gold tier. Down in the silver tier, you've got Civ 6, which is one of the games that I've been recently playing. Sea of Thieves, which is another good performance note for Xbox. Again, this is a game that if you wanted to, you could pay for Game Pass and go over to Xbox Game Pass or PC Game Pass and consume the game without paying additional money. But people don't do that. People pay for the game on Steam. It's a $40 game, normally on sale now for $20. People are paying money for that and probably going in and participating in microtransactions in the internal economy and all that, to get it ranked up here, sufficient to get it into the silver list. So that's good on Microsoft for them. Remnant is a nice thing to see in the list because again that's coming from a studio. Actually, before I say that, I'm actually not. I know Slow Mo plays Remnant, but I have not toe dipped into that. Why am I not seeing it in the silver list now? Pretty sure it was up here. I may have may just be bypassing it right now. Minstree mentions what part of Starfield reviews are based on how Xbox promoted the game as game of the generation. Oh, what part of the Starfield reviews are based on is how Xbox promoted the game as game of the generation. Falling short of those lofty goals could result in mixed reviews. Yeah, very true. I would say I never personally bought into the Microsoft hype about it being game of the generation or the least buggy Bethesda game or the way the entire game leadership team from Xbox sat on the game to got out the door. None of that ever moved the needle on my impressions of the game. Regardless, the game. All the things that I mentioned tonight, games being performant, that game is not. The whole mess about, you may need to buy a new PC was just a point of dishonesty in terms of how well the game was hardware optimized. All the kind of smoke and mirrors about, the AMD exclusivity, things like that. Regardless, at the end of the day, the game was a performant. It didn't scale well the more hardware you threw at it. The game has its own problems. Definitely part of the marketing I played into that, but I also think the game, wouldn't have come off well, based on how the game is designed and how the game is constructed. Forza Horizon 5 also in here, another good on Microsoft. Particularly given that, again, Forza Motorsport is also a game that is getting really horrible reviews on Steam. I myself, a few weeks ago was, going through my Forza collection and looking for something to play because people know that I love racing games. And I mean, faced with the choice of playing Forza Motorsport or Forza Horizon 5, I went back to Forza Horizon 5. It's weird how Forza Horizon has become the flagship, within the Xbox stable of studios versus Forza Motorsport. So it will be interesting to see what Playground does because Turn 10 always builds the platform and the engine for the next iteration, and then Playground takes that and builds Forza Horizon on top of it. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes this time. Skylines 2, again, mixed reviews, had really bad reviews out of the gate, really bad performance, still selling well in the silver tier. Jedi Survivor, and there's a ton of EA games that are of this pedigree of bad performance, don't play well, stutters, just not a great degree of graphical fidelity. Jedi Survivor, Wild Hearts, Dead Space, and Wild Hearts maybe isn't in here, but Jedi Survivor and Dead Space are all in different buckets in these top charts. And then at the bronze tier, Spider-Man, Skylines, the original Skylines is in here as well. T-Lu, which is actually a success story after that studio went in and applied 11 patches or more to get that game out of the horrendous state it was in when it launched. It was basically a Redfall equivalent, maybe even worse on PC. But Naughty Dog grabbed control of that back and turned it around, and the game does. You can see here. Oh, actually, it's mixed now. I thought it. I think it's mixed. I'm actually going to go to that page. Of course, I have to tell them how old I am. I always just lie. It's very positive recent, right? But mixed overall. But yeah, good on, the end of the year, we're kind of revisiting a lot of studio resilience and the mark of, a team's performance by how they respond to adversity when they're forced by their publisher to release something on the market that doesn't really stick the landing. And so it's good to see them being rewarded for that by good sales. Ready or Not, which was in early access for a long time, has a lot of devs from the old SWAT series by Sierra Publishing. In particular, it's very similar to SWAT 4, which was an old favorite of mine. So that's selling well. Grounded selling well, another good on Xbox. World of Warships, long in the tooth, maybe not so much. Still earning quite a significant amount of revenue. Miles Morales, Age of Wonders 4. So there's been a lot of stuff about Paradox this year with I can't remember the name of the studio, but the studio that put out I think it was an RTS or a turn-based strategy game, and then had to basically declare their independence from Paradox because the game didn't perform well, and there were rifts between them and Paradox. But Paradox also has a number of games, Stellaris, Age of Wonders 4, and a couple of other games in this list in different buckets showing good sales. So that's just kind of where Steam wound up this year with people making revenue. So last news story I really want to go over is CD Projekt Red's recent statements. So the story over on where the heck is this? I don't even know where this is. MP First. I think I pulled this from a news app on mobile, so it wasn't necessarily certain of the website, because I didn't actually go to the website itself. But at any rate, CD Projekt Red not interested in being acquired, believes they'll be bigger and stronger in a few years. And I quote, "There's an ongoing acquisition war in the gaming industry, with the most recent deal closing being the Microsoft Activision acquisition. Many have been speculating who may be next, with some suggesting that CD Projekt Red, the studio behind The Witcher and Cyberpunk games, is among those potentially being bought out. While it may be a name being thrown around that both Microsoft and Sony are interested in, it certainly isn't something that CD Projekt Red themselves are considering. As a studio confirmed, they have no interest in joining a larger entity." So look, one of the things that I contend when this conversation goes around is, first of all, CD Projekt Red also owns and operates Good Old Games, or what a lot of us on PC refer to as GOG. I contend that none of the Big Ten want GOG. So any notion or entertainment of an idea of going after CD Projekt Red is going to be entangled with having to figure out how to unfoist themselves from that thing. Granted, it could probably be sold, it could probably be spun off, it could be divested, whatever, but nobody wants it, and I don't know that anybody wants to deal with it. Enate mentions, yep, I was glad they answered that CD Projekt Red needs to stay right where they are, and I don't disagree, Enate. Look, people have heard me say it on BRAP. People disagree with it. I don't really care. I'm going to tell you, industry consolidation is a problem in the gaming industry. Again, basic principles of economics. By decrementing the total number of suppliers, you reduce the mathematical, right, the numerical points of choice by consumers, and that's bad, right? That's a negative. You can have discussions about whether or not it's at a tip-over point, or it's going to turn upside down, or it's the Titanic. The severity of that impact, fine. But as a simple mathematical equation, reducing the total number of suppliers on the market is a net bad for consumers. So, in this whole notion that, like I said, that people leave these AAA studios and they go off and create independent studios, and so that's good, and there's this recycling and great returning to the fountain of talent. They're like, I don't believe that's true, because what we see is, yeah, they leave these studios, they go off and they do things like build up striking distance and do Callisto Protocol, and then their game doesn't hit numbers, and then they fold. And I don't know that those people necessarily come back. I've cited these examples a bajillion times, right? I love Jade Raymond and what she's done, but Jade hasn't really shipped a game since she left Ubisoft. Not in a significant, directly participatory way. I think she was like executive producer on something. Cliff Blazinski, who I interviewed, and again, love what Cliff has done, for the industry and the games that he's built. But, he left, he went and tried to do Lawbreakers. That didn't work, mostly, I believe, because of the publisher's behavior. But he hasn't come back into the industry and like created this new great thing. I don't know that the developers who left Playground Studios are really going to build a AAA studio and really build anything of significance. But we have numerous examples of these stories of where, these developers have gone off, made something, either not shipped their game, had to shut down before they shipped their game, shipped one game didn't hit the numbers, they folded. Maybe they even shipped the first game. But after they ship the first game, if it is successful, then they tend to get reacquired, right, by another thing, and you get right back into consolidation. So, it's good to hear and see, and we've heard numerous examples of other studios who have stood their ground and said, we're not interested in being acquired, and we've got our own thing. I agree, Nate. So my whole point of this is, look, when we hear these things that Microsoft is thinking about buying this or Sony's thinking about buying that, again, as I've tried to reiterate to people, you need to understand there is an entire department, and by department I mean what department in terms of like a thing that could, a body of people that would scale depending on the size of the corporation. But each of these corporations has a department or a division or whatever you want to call it, what have you, that is dedicated to the business process of M&As, mergers and acquisitions, on an annualized basis. That is their job. That is what they literally do 40 hours a week to do, some of them making six-figure salaries. So there is always a plan on the boards for acquisitions. There is always an ongoing discussion of acquisitions. Some of that, it's a whole department of people, and that results in one acquisition in a year. Sometimes it doesn't result in any. But those people are dedicated and allocated to staying in sync with the overall business strategy, going out and doing sensing on the market and looking for smalls who they can pick up, who they can fold in, acqui-hires, talent that they need to bring in, particular pieces of technology, including patents that they need to go buy, right, just to get something off the market and get it into their own portfolio. At any point in time, pick any given Sunday, if you were able to reach into a company of the size of Sony or Microsoft and get a hold of documentation of strategy, you will always find a list of companies that are targets on there for acquisitions. It is part of their annualized plan, blah, 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 blah. So the fact that Microsoft and Sony said, maybe said, or there was a leak, or was in a document, or there was a soundbite, or there's whatever that, we're thinking about buying that. That is true all the time, literally 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So the fact that they're thinking about it means nothing, right? Because until they actually have a conversation and the target acquisition is actually interested in being acquired, if it's a publicly traded company, then it's not just the company, the company leadership that has to be convinced, but the board has to be convinced. The other investors have to be convinced. So M&As get vetted, every year, so I don't think it's as big of a deal as sometimes the gaming community makes out of it when they hear these sound bites that somebody is under discussion of being acquired. So that's the news that I wanted to cover. The other thing that I wanted to drop a recommendation and note for was Digital Foundry has a podcast out now, Worst PC Ports. It is a very illuminating and interesting piece to listen to. I think it's about a 45-minute podcast. I'm not going to reveal the titles that they talked about, but I really appreciated the number one that, like I've mentioned in this show, that they also do a thing that I do, which is I look at, not just whether or not a studio sticks the landing, but if they miss the landing, how do they stick with it, right? Do they stay on the horse? Do they put patches out? How quickly do they put patches out? How quickly do they respond? How dedicated are they to follow through? I think that speaks to your expectations of a team, and a team that you want to watch and keep an eye on for later things that they do, just as much as a team that sticks the landing with a thing out of the gate, maybe even more so. Maybe even more so in terms of, not only does that mean that that team has that resilience, but that also means that that publisher has a dedication to, their brand equity and providing the funding that's necessary, right, and green-lighting the level of effort that goes along with sticking with that game, and continuing to exert that level of effort. Now, again, you can have the argument that maybe they should have done that right in the first place instead of trying to cut corners or, not give them enough engineers or however you want to, right, visualize it. But the point is that, when a team sticks with something and turns it around, particularly if they get on it and get the thing propped up in the first 3 months, I think that's huge. And so that Digital Foundry talks about that a little bit in their podcast. But again, it's definitely a factor that I use when I'm kind of mentally racking and stacking studios and publishers in my head of who I trust the most, who I have the most consumer confidence in deliveries. And lastly, I'll close out with things that I've been playing. I think I've kind of dropped some notes on them throughout the show. But I've been playing Civilization 6 on Nintendo Switch. I've had an interest in going back and playing some of the PC ports on Nintendo Switch here as we're kind of going into what is probably the last year of its life cycle. I've also been playing a lot of Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 3 on PC because it's the holidays and I've had time to jump in and do, it's you can have your problems with Call of Duty, but what I continue to like about it is I can jump in and I can play for 30 minutes or an hour and get something productive out of it. Or I could play, 3 or 4 hours and still have a great time playing. And then I have, like I said, I've been also playing a lot of Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. So probably going to stick with that and keep plugging through it. I'm probably at the point now where Priscilla mentions, Priscilla in the chat mentions listening and playing KF2. So I'm brain cramping on what KF2 is. So if you or Innate want to mention that in the chat, I'm sure it's going to be something super obvious. I also did horrible at Boulder Dash tonight, so I'm probably not in the frame of mind to get acronyms. But Killing Floor 2. That's right. Very cool. So like I said, I've been playing Avatar Frontiers of Pandora as well. And where I'm at now, I'm probably at the point now where I want to deploy it on a couple other hardware sets and kind of see how it performs across a spectrum of PCs, and go from there. Particularly, it'd be interesting to see how that FOV slider hits PCs that where I'm running less than an RTX 4080 to give me a sense of kind of how well it scales for people who are maybe on lower end PCs. And then other than that, I don't know what I'm going to get into next, but kind of have a hankering to get back to continue playing some more Modern Warfare 3 as well as Halo Infinite. I've also been playing a good chunk of that and progressing through the season. I'm definitely on my games as a service multiplayer PvP. It's a great thing to play during the holidays because there's nothing like a bunch of noobs getting new Xboxes and just clapping cheeks, right? Because they're showing up in these PvP games not knowing how to play. I was playing Halo Infinite the other night, and there's literally a team who didn't know to go get active camo. They just left active camo alone for the entirety of the match, and of course they lost. So it's great. Innate says, so fun segment for the future. At some point, you have to explain each of your stations in this room, LOL. And Minstree says, did you play Skull and Bones? Beta thoughts. So Innate, I will definitely do that. We'll talk about each of the battle stations and kind of what role they play and kind of how I kind of formulate my opinions of different PC games and their performance across different hardware sets. Minstree, I did not play the Skull and Bones beta. I played the Skull and Bones. I think I was in Alpha 2 or Alpha 3. So I did get my initial impressions. Thoughts, I won't go into excruciating detail, but what I will say is two things. Number one, people keep saying, including Brap, keep saying that game is never coming out. And of course, I didn't tell people because I was under NDA that I was in the alpha at the time. But I was like, that game's coming out. Because Ubisoft is one of these publishers that continue spending money and staying after a game and keeping their teams on it. And I know that they've been through a bunch of nightmares and there's all types of development hell stories, but I'm like, that game's coming out. I have a small envelope of what that game needs to fulfill that is much more tactical than, and I played Dreadnought was one of the games that I played, and so I think that game is going to fulfill that for me. It may not do a lot of things for other people, but it's definitely something that I'm keeping my eye on. I'm not ignoring that game, assuming that it's going to be a failure. I think it's a wait and see. So Innate mentions, yeah, we used to call new players for Christmas baby buffaloes. That's a new one for me, Innate. I'm used to the term seal clubbing, but which is especially a term that gets used a lot in the EVE online community. But baby buffaloes, I'll have to use that one. Priscilla mentions battle stations. Yes, that is. I used to call them desktop one, but I can't remember. There were some reasons why that stopped working for me, and I had to use the term battle station. I think because of pieces of equipment and gear that I was associating with the gaming PC. But yes, we will definitely follow that. Like I said, I plan to do these solo junkets more frequently in 2024. So more frequently, yet at random. And so I'll try to let people know when I'm planning on doing them. Innate mentions that, yeah, we used to call them that because you could always tell who they were, because like baby buffaloes, they would just wander out into the open. Right. All right. So thanks so much, everybody, for coming through. I certainly did not expect, the number of people to come through that did. I appreciate you. Some of you guys I know from other shows. I'm hoping that you stick with it. I realize, I don't always do these things at a time when it's convenient for everyone else, but whenever you do have time, please feel free to Priscilla, look forward to all the solo talks. We'll try and make them live. Thanks for the news and talk. Yes, thank you as well, Priscilla. So on that note, for everybody who came through the live stream, I appreciate you. Thank you, Minchery. Thank you, Innate. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you, Otacon. I want to say there was one other one, so I don't know who that was, though. But thank you, everybody who came through the live stream. I appreciate you. For anybody who happens to watch the archive version of this live stream on the Rounding Off Affinity Gaming channel on YouTube, please feel frui to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever I post new content or go live. Like I said, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do this next. It's going to be, I'm going to do at least probably one of these every 7 days, maybe more, but it will be sometimes relatively at random. So just keep an eye out. Hear it on the social media, Game Logic on Twitter. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Come here to talk to me about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Affinity Gaming channel on YouTube. One of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, as well as the Basement Radio Arcade podcast on the BRAP channel on YouTube. Look forward to seeing you guys sometime soon, not too long after the start of the new year, or who knows, maybe even before. Other than that, that's all I've got for tonight. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. I'm out of here.